Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another riveting episode of Let's Be Honest. On today's episode, I want to do something a little bit different. No politics. I want to share a super simple method that I always use to keep myself honest when it came to my students' academic performance. I'm going to be talking about standardized testing, and I don't want you to think that I am a supporter of the way that many states, certainly Texas, use bubble tests and weaponize the data to create this machine for grading schools, grading teachers, closing schools down, and in my state, even depriving local communities of the right to elect their local school board. But let me begin by telling you, I love data. I absolutely loathe data used as a cudgel. Data should always serve an actionable purpose. Data should work for you. You shouldn't work for data. I hope this helps you as you wrestle with the data dragon. Number one, no data guilt trips. Don't ever let anyone guilt trip you into overdosing on data. You can collect and analyze all the data that matters on your campus on a single Saturday with a glass of wine at home, not at your desk at school. If you do it right, you can enjoy data. Number two, no paralysis by analysis. Limit your data analysis to the scope that you can handle. After you start small and get a handle on your data, you can always expand the scope, but you have to get command of your data analysis preferences. I want to get a little bit Texas specific to illustrate what I mean. I only looked at the approaches level of student performance on my master spreadsheet that I'm going to describe in just a second. That's the minimum passing level. Meets and masters are higher levels, and I would have people guilt trip me and say, you should be including meets and masters on your spreadsheet. But I always defaulted to a simple spreadsheet to look at. I always included just the all students population. For my main 30,000 foot view, I wanted to know mainly how my all students group was doing at the approaches level of performance. That may seem awfully simple. Well, it was simple. It doesn't make me a low expectations guy for not including masters and meets, and it doesn't make me a racist for not including all the different subpopulations of kids. I didn't crash the plane because I was trying to count the leaves on the trees. So I kept it simple so I could fly the plane. Number three, have an objective measuring stick. And I always use the state's approaches rate because it's right there. It's easy to find. Your scores going up from where they were last year, that's not necessarily a celebration. If your score goes up, but the state score goes up more, then you had a bad year, not a good year, right? I always reserve the right to stop looking at the state score as my comparison and maybe switch to our region because our region had a lot of high-performing schools in it, and that was a little bit of a higher target. But again, I wanted to start with attainability for my staff because I use this tool for motivational purposes. So for me, beating the state and then later, beating the region, those were attainable goals, and they were easily understandable goals, and they were right there on the taper report that Texas uses. Next, the line graph is absolute gold. You can see trends over time. And the reason I say two lines, one for your school district and one for the target, in my case, it was usually the state's average. You can see over time, are we closing the gap between our students' performance and the average performance across the state? Or you can see that, we caught up the state and we passed them, and now we're expanding our lead on the state. It was very important to me that I be able to take the data and convert it into these line graphs, so at a glance, my teachers could see, are we catching up to the state? And my spreadsheet looked at each test, so third grade reading, third grade math, all the way through the high school tests, and we would have a line graph for each one of those tests. But again, I didn't overcomplicate it by including sub-pops or by including meets and masters. I only looked at approaches and the all students group. And that gave us, 12 or 13 line graphs each year that we could go all the way back to 2012 and see, have we improved our performance and how has the state done over that same period of time? I did that to keep myself honest. Next, you need to check on your teachers. If you run a campus, you're a principal, you have to objectively look at your teacher results. Mrs. Smith may be considered the best teacher on your campus, and people may have thought of her that way for 30 years. We love her. She's super nice. But what does her data say? Don't just believe the hype about a teacher. You need to go to the numbers. And if you find that Mrs. Smith truly does have consistently high scores, that is fantastic. But you still need to check yourself because you have to think it through. It may be that she has the brightest kids. Is she your GT teacher? If she is, then her good scores at the approaches level don't count. She has smart kids. You know, her class is full of smart kids. Of course, her scores are better. What you need to know is her teaching better, right? If she's got a room full of GT students, her master's grade level scores should compare favorably to the approaches scores of her non-GT teacher colleagues. And if they don't, then, you know, she may not be as good instructionally as her sterling reputation insists that she is. A principal doesn't get to be a sucker, and neither does a superintendent, ever. You have to be analytical, you have to be skeptical enough to always get at the truth, get past appearances, see through the institutional legend making that is common in schools. It doesn't mean be mean, it just means be honest. Number 6, don't buy magic beans. Ultimately, my academic analysis boils down to a very simple spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is all I ever needed to drive improvement. The endless data tools that are now at our disposal, massive education data universe, to me, that's always done little more than clutter my thinking and cause me to just freeze up because I don't even know where to start. There's a lot of education fad marketing, and a lot of that is just magic beans for sale, so don't get caught up in it. Now, you may be a master at data and Excel and everything else, and if you are and that stuff is beneficial to you, then absolutely jump on it. But don't beat your teachers over the head with excessive data analysis. Next, the spreadsheet of destiny. Here we go. My spreadsheet has a column for every year, going back, in my case, to 2012, because that's when the STAR test came to life here in Texas. And those rows are the tested subjects, right? So 3rd grade math. But it's not just my score. I also do Texas right under my score. So I want to be able to see how did we do, and then how did the state do. I use that for goal setting. And then what I do is I highlight the campus cells green if they show progress from my campus performance the prior year. So what you want to see is green, green, green. I highlight them yellow if the performance held static, and I highlight them red if we dropped from the year before. Did we go up or did we go down? And then comes my favorite part. When my kids beat the state average passing rate, I paste a red circle over both numbers. My goal is to have more red circles every year until the assumption becomes that we will usually beat the target, in our case, the state average performance. This is how I tried to create the norm of winning among my staff. It's how I built belief. We can win, we should win, and we do win. But again, keep it simple. Make it a competition. A competition between who? Between your staff and some external foe. In my case, it was always the state. And talk about that often. People are naturally competitive and they love to win. And when you are winning and you can see it, it builds morale. Make it a running game. Praise your teachers and show them that the gaps are closing. This motivates them. Highlight improvement versus yourself in previous years. That's motivational. But also acknowledge declining results versus previous years and talk about the reason why, and be honest with yourself. Own the progress requirement. It's not optional that things get better. It's an ironclad obligation year upon year upon year. It doesn't matter what your feelings say about it. Your city and your kids depend on you. These general ideas can be used for analyzing all kinds of campus data, not just the STAR test or whatever your state's standardized test is. You can look at attendance data, discipline data, graduation rates, SAT, ACT performance, SAT, ACT participation. Any data source you have, compare it over time against an external marker of some kind and turn it into line graphs and turn it into a competition. Show those line graphs to your staff for transparency, but mainly for motivation. It works well, I promise you. I want to add one more thing. When the state decided to use testing data to stack rank schools against each other, it turned student test performance into a game. Whether you like the system or not, whether you think it keeps us accountable for student learning so that we do our jobs well and work harder, or whether you think it's a perversion of what education is supposed to be and it narrows the curriculum so that there's a lot of things we're not teaching that we should be teaching because it's not on the test. Whichever viewpoint you have is fine with me. You probably know my opinion, but here's what I'll tell you. If it's a game, you better play to win. You need to understand the system. You need to understand the rules, and you need to understand this. If it isn't prohibited, it's allowed. So don't be stupid. Game the system because it's a game, but don't cheat, don't break the law, be ethical, but be a fierce competitor. You have to move your campus's grade or your district's grade up if you want to keep your job in school leadership. So next video we're going to do, I'm going to tell you a couple of ways to game the Texas A through F accountability system that are legal and are guaranteed to move your scores in the right direction. They also illustrate something that I think is extremely important to say, and that is that this system doesn't tell us which schools are better and which schools are worse. The data is so polluted with other factors, and not just student poverty, although that's a big one. We don't teach the same kinds of kids in different school districts around the state, but there are other things too, like, do you know how to game the scoring methodology? We're going to talk about that in the next video. I don't want to give anything away yet, so I'm going to stop right there. And I'll stop with this. You can possibly goose your scores by adopting a drill and kill test prep only environment at your school. And I had a friend of mine recently, great science teacher, talking about a visit that he and some other teachers got to have to a very prominent charter school chain. It's a science and math heavy school, and they get really good results on the STAR test on science and math. What my friend told me was it was the saddest school he'd ever seen during that tour, because the kids were miserable, because it was drill and kill all day, every day, and nothing mattered except that test. And of course, that's their brand, right? Their marketing is, we are a science and math heavy school, and if your kids come here, they're going to learn a lot of science and math. And you know, that's their business, right? That's how they want to run their schools. It's working for them as far as you know, they've got students and they're making money from the Texas charter, you know, scheme that is set up by our governor and our education commissioner. But to me, and to most people that I know in the traditional public education system, the goal ultimately is not high math and science STAR scores. The state wants that to be the be-all, end-all of education. But those of us that have worked concession stands at basketball games and gone to student plays and done so many other things, we tend to believe that there's a lot more to school and a lot more to education than drill and kill. And so we educate the whole child, right? And I think, you know, it's a question for me of who are you ultimately going to be accountable to? You can make Mike Morath and Governor Abbott very happy by drilling and killing our kids so that they, you know, score well on the STAR test. And especially if you're dealing with kids from impoverished backgrounds, kids who are coming from different language backgrounds, and you're having to overcome hurdles like language and culture, you know, trying to get those scores up by any means necessary, including by cutting the heart out of the educational experience that a kid should get. To me, that, you know, that might make Morath and Abbott happy, but it won't make God happy, because I think we have a mission in public schools to do right by little human beings that are going to grow up to be big human beings, and they need more from us than drill and kill. So don't make Mike Morath happy and make God sad. Make God happy, even if it makes Mike Morath sad. Thanks for watching.